Hello everybody. So in this video, we will be looking at the degrees of freedom. Feel free to watch this video at 1.25 times the speed or 1.5 times the speed, whichever you are comfortable at. So the equation of a line is the equation which is written over here, which is y is equivalent to mx plus c, where m is the slope and c is the constant. Okay, so when you try and graph such a line, there are infinitely possible ways you could draw whatever line you want by varying the parameters of C and varying the parameters of M. So let's look at a simpler case first, and let's look at a case where y is just equivalent to mx. Okay, so y is just equivalent to mx, and in this scenario, C is equivalent to 0, and it's just a constant. Okay, so this means any line you could vary M all you want, but any line which you draw has to pass through the center over here. Because the C is given as constant. So these are sets of possible, there are infinite possible lines which you could draw, but all of these have to kind of pass through the center. I know my drawing isn't the best, but all these lines have to pass through the center for y is equal to mx. So let's look at another example where you try and draw where even m is fixed, m is 1 and c is 0. So this line is just straight line at a 45-degree angle. Okay, this is the equation of the line, which is y is equal to x. Okay, and there's only one possible value. There's only one line. There's only one way you can draw this y is equal to x, and this turns into the negative rate. This is the only line which has. So this is an equation which has 0 degrees of freedom. Okay, and similarly, y is equal to mx. Since you can vary one parameter, this equation has 1 degree of freedom. So degrees of freedom are generally the number of parameters which you are allowed to vary in order to sketch or form some sort of combination, or in this scenario, since you're talking about graphs, is the number of ways you can draw a graph. And this is the only parameter which you could vary, number of parameters which you can vary in order to draw a graph. When it comes to y is equal to mx plus c, there are two possible values which you can vary, which is m and c over here. So this leads to like any kind of line. As long as it's a line, you could draw any possible line by varying different parameters of m and c, and still there are infinite possibilities, and you could keep varying m and c, and this has 2 degrees of freedom. Okay, but now let's try and bring this idea of degrees of freedom to statistics, as we have seen in variance pretty frequently. So let x be the number of students in my class, and my goal is to try and find out the average class size in all the classes I teach, and maybe try and see if they're under 30 or not. So this is a sample of 4 classes, and these are the number of students in each of my class, and the average is 28. Okay, so but given that I know that the sample mean is 28, how many possible combinations are available where we have 4 values where the average is 28? You could always have 24, 26, 30, 32. The average of this set is 28. There's another where you could have like 20, 24, and then you could have 32 and 34. The average of both are 28. So when you try and think about this, like let's say you try and actually, in this 20, 24, 32, and 24. So once you fill out 3 values, the 4th value is not free to vary. You could fill out any number of values for these 3, but having filled the first 3 observations, given that you know the sample mean is 28, this value has to be 34 in order for the sample mean to be 28. And this is the idea of n minus 1 degrees of freedom, where n is your sample size, and this has 3 degrees of freedom because your sample size is 4. So anytime when you're trying to think about variances and you're interested in sample means, and whenever you're trying to find out the variance, or the sample variance to be more specific, you only have n minus 1 degrees of freedom because of the fact that you already know the sample mean. Since you already know the sample mean, whenever you're using concerned about degrees of freedom for the sample variance, your number of parameters are always restricted at n minus 1, given that because you already know the sample mean. And this is the idea of degrees of freedom, where the fourth parameter is not allowed to vary and it has to kind of be a certain value such that the sample mean is equal to what you know it is. Right, and that's it for this video.